Episode 2. This is a hard nut to crack, because the listeners have high expectations and I must not let them leave disappointed. At this point in time, I assume I have to offer you, dear listeners, more insight into my backstory, talk more precisely about my motivation, and maybe even offer you a flashback about my old life before I ended up on this island. There is this one thing that always gets me, makes me slightly unhappy. Something like a character trait. Let me explain it with a fitting example. Whenever I get angry to have been forced to grow up as a stranger in a strange land, my brain starts compiling a list of reasons which explain what is so wrong with the country and the people still living there. It is the same old lamentation about a perverted German understanding of community, an abomination that can only be endured by jetting around the world, Fernweh, they even got a word for it, or creating Parallelgesellschaften, parallel societies in English, because having a well-paid job seems to not be enough for some foreigners. And then this happens. A voice in my head tells me, accuses me, you are just jealous. You didn't get a well-paid job. You failed in becoming a productive member of the society. So, after collecting bitterness and hate in your heart for over 20 years, you just decided to give up. You blamed everybody but yourself and you went away. This is what this voice tells me. So, who is lying and who is telling the truth? That is not so easy to decide. That is why I would like to ask some questions, and maybe the answers that we get can help us decide together. So let's assume, for the sake of the argument, that by the will of the gods, or pure luck, or by me having some useful skills, that I would have got a good job, build a house, and become a respectful nobody in a society of strangers. Would that have been the solution? Would I have become one of those happy foreigners who visit their home country once or twice or even thrice a year and feel depressed when they have to return back to good old Germany? And who knows, maybe I would have become one of those individuals crying almost every time they return back to their beautiful house and their nice job. I am sure those are tears of joy. Don't get me wrong, I understand that those lost souls believe that there are good reasons to ignore the feelings and the crying. They might argue it is reasonable to accept that you cannot get everything and that sometimes you have to sacrifice something important in whatever the end game might be. But let me ask you this. Isn't it reasonable to read the crying and the pain in your heart as a clear sign of your psyche that what you are doing to yourself just isn't right? And wouldn't the more reasonable reaction be to stop ignoring those signs? Isn't there someone who said life is not about the end point, it's about the journey to get there? And I mean, we all know the end point, it's death, and it comes to all of us. It doesn't matter what life we have been living. To be honest, I am somehow happy that I didn't succeed in Germany, that I failed in building my Traumhaus, getting the job that would fulfill me, because would I then have been able to leave all that behind and go live on a Greek island? I mean, there is still no proof that I am on Jacob's list. So let's just call it fate. It is as good an explanation as any other. I feel like we are nearing the end of this episode, and we might end it without a proper flashback. The best I can offer you are two small recollections that I feel are needed for the listeners to better understand everything that I will be obsessing about in future episodes of the podcast. A long time ago, a German friend told me that one explanation for the peculiar German way of life could be a higher percentage of autism. It is a confession that made me smile, because this was said years ago, long before it became cool to be on the spectrum. Yes, now everybody is in some way or form on this mystical spectrum, so everybody can feel both special and a victim of the evil and normal majority. But what made me smile then was that those words were ushered by an individual who himself had and still has problems maintaining social contacts and who prefers to be left alone. So, him using the word autism for himself and his fellow Germans could also be a cop-out excuse, because what do you want to be called more? An asocial asshole or autistic? I mean, autism might be an illness, but it is just an illness. And being ill is quite normal. It can happen in the best of families. But the asshole, that is an accusation best only used for right-wingers. So, problem solved. But let us run with this explanation. Let us assume that a substantial majority of German people suffer from autism. This would make them at least uncomfortable when having to interact with friends, acquaintances, and strangers. How would they cope with it? By introducing rules and making a group ritual out of it. That is why in Viking movies or TV show of your choice, you can see the Germanic tribes drinking and enjoying themselves as groups in those beautiful and big mead halls. And if you now think that this is too far-fetched, then let us look at a second statement from my good old German friend, who was so friendly to remind me that the obsession of Marxists, socialists, and communists for small communities, clubs, unions, and communes comes probably from the often neglected fact that the founder of the so-called scientific socialism was a German. So, if you really want to save humanity, if you want to free das Proletariat and defeat the evil bourgeoisie, please do it the proper way, by being the member of a club, of a group, of the so-called Verein. Ach, yes, der Verein. Such a beautiful word that cannot be translated properly, as it is with all words that describe the human condition. Others would be Fernweh, Weltschmerz, and Gestalt. A common translation would be club or association. The word Verein can also be found in the verb vereinen, which means to unite. It is a common knowledge by now that the Germans always want to be united. They want to be part of a group, of something bigger. But what gets ignored is that they want to be part of a group even when they meet friends, drink, eat, and spend some nice time together. So by now I am pretty confident to say that if there is something invented by a human mind, you will find a Verein, a club for it in Germany. That is maybe the reason why, bear with me, swinger and sex clubs are so more present in Germany than in other parts of Europe. Think about it. But if you happen to be an individual who has been blessed or cursed with a specific character trait of not wanting to always be part of a group, of following societal rules when meeting friends and foreigners, being dragged to clubs, paying money for memberships, and bringing food and drinks to weekly, monthly, or annual meetings, then you might, at some point in time, start feeling like a stranger in a strange land.